Good afternoon, guys. This is Coffee with Gaz, right? What that means is that this isn't going to be a long form vlog style video. Rather, what we're going to do is answer a question that has come in from one of you guys. So if you watch one of these videos and you'd like your question to be answered or discussed, then feel free to drop it in the comment section below. And this week's question is, what would be your top tips or considerations or nuggets of advice for someone trying to gain their first 10 pounds of muscle? Okay, and this is a really good question because it gets at something that a lot of beginners, including me, did not or do not think about very often, and that is the fact that what is required for a beginner to begin making progress is very different to what is required for those individuals that they may be looking up to. You know, for example, when we first get into training, or at least this was the case with me, you begin to wonder, you know, what are the really well-muscled guys doing? What are the bodybuilders doing? What are, you know, the fitness models doing? So you begin to follow the practices of those who may be training for 5, 10, 15, even 20 years, and we assume that that is what is required for us, you know? So that's obviously the same for any sport. You know, it's the same for someone who maybe is getting into something like MMA, you know, mixed martial arts. They might be like, I've never done this before, so I'm just going to look at Conor McGregor or Nate Diaz or Khabib or anyone else and wonder, what are these guys doing? So I'm just going to basically copy what they do. And that is a bit foolish for a very simple reason, and that is that as we become more adapted to training, we require much higher levels of stimuli to continue progressing our fitness characteristics. In this case, what we're referring to as a fitness characteristic is increasing muscle size or muscle hypertrophy. Okay, so basically what you're looking to do is find a way that you can increase the size of your muscles so that you can gain those first 10 pounds of muscle. All right. So then what we want to do is think about, okay, I don't exactly require the same amount of stimulus that a professional or a really advanced trainee might require. So what does that actually mean? Like, what does that actually mean for me? What it means for you is that as a beginner, you need a very small, low level of stimulus for you to begin getting adaptations, okay? So that's basically what you're in the game for. You just want to apply a sufficient stimulus so that you can get the adaptations that you need, and then you move forward, okay? What you don't want is to apply, you know, a super high level of stimulus and still only get this level of adaptation when you could have applied this level of stimulus and gotten that level of adaptation. What that might look like is doing, say, if you were to follow maybe your favorite bodybuilder and they're doing 20 sets for quads in a given workout, in a single workout, and you go and do that and you only get the benefit of maybe 5 sets, then you've essentially just trained an additional 15 sets, which involves more time in the gym, more pain the following day probably, potentially a higher risk of injury because you weren't adapted to that training load, all for a much smaller unit of training adaptation, essentially. So that would be my first tip. It would be to be conservative with your starting point and do not just jump to an advanced program right away. It may be fun, you know, it may feel like you're doing a lot, but sometimes it can actually be counterproductive. Because if you're doing so much training that you're not even able to recover from it, then it's really difficult to keep coming back into the gym and progress week on week because you're so fatigued that your performance isn't improving, you're not giving your body the time to adapt, and it can potentially even give you worse results than if you had done less training. So that is always something to keep in mind, is that there's probably some sort of inverted U in terms of the amount of training that we can do and the responses that we get. So we probably, you know, we get an increased response as we increase the training stimulus. It probably flattens out a little bit then, but then it probably starts to decrease as we get to really high levels of training volume or training stimulus, essentially. So what would that actually look like for an individual who is trying to, you know, start the training process and get things going? So basically all I've told you so far is don't do what the professionals and the advanced trainees are doing. So what you should really be focused on is starting to get a grasp of the exercises that you're likely to be doing for many years to come. So it's not necessarily required that you practice or train with any particular exercise to build muscle. That's not a requirement. You don't necessarily need to squat, you don't necessarily need to deadlift, but it is very likely that as a result of, bringing yourself into fitness culture and strength culture, physical culture, that you're going to want to at least do some variation of those exercises just because it's what everyone else does. And that may seem like really loose, not very useful justification, but when you actually start to train, you start to realize that this actually is useful justification, because you go to most gyms in the world and you're always going to be able to do a squat because there's always a barbell and there's always a squat rack, whereas there may not always be your favorite leg press, So while I'm a big fan of using machines, I do like to get beginners to at least get a grasp for some of the exercises that are likely to be accessible to them anywhere they go in the world, and that they're also going to be able to do with their friends, peers, colleagues when they go to the gym, because most people are going to convene on a small group of exercises, such as squat variations, typically some sort of barbell squat variation, some sort of deadlift variation, some sort of overhead press variation, and some sort of bench press variation. And then obviously you've got your rows, you've got your pull downs or pull ups, and all those types of exercises as well. So when you start to put together a program that basically your goal is to start developing your technique on those exercises and to start beginning to add some strength, you begin to train almost your whole body with just a handful of exercises. So for example, if you were doing a barbell squat, it could be a front squat, it could be a back squat. If you were doing a deadlift variation, it could be a Romanian deadlift, it could be a standard conventional deadlift, it could be a sumo deadlift. If you're doing those two exercises, you're doing a bench press variation, it could be flat barbell, it could be dumbbell, it could be incline barbell. You're doing an overhead press variation, and you're doing maybe some chin-ups or some rows, something like that. You've basically taken care of training your whole body, okay? And what you might be thinking there is, oh wait, no, but I haven't really done any direct bicep exercises, or I haven't done any direct tricep exercises. But remember at the start, what we said was, as a beginner, you require such a low level of stimulus to get your adaptations. And if you are using your triceps in exercises like overhead presses, in exercises like bench presses, if you're using your biceps during your rows, during your pull downs or pull-ups, then that is actually a pretty significant training stimulus for those muscles, independent of any additional work that you might think that you need to do. So when you look at, the workouts online that you see some of your advanced idols doing, they may be doing, 4, 8, 12 sets for arms at the end of their workout, whereas for you at this point in time, it's probably not as much of a priority. So when you take that handful of exercises, and again, there's nothing magic to them, only that you are likely to want to do them at some point. They're pretty efficient at training a lot of muscle groups, and they're very accessible, as I said. When you take all those exercises together, you've got a pretty good arsenal of exercises that are going to contribute to whole body strength and whole body muscle development. So you've taken all of the large muscle groups in the body and you're giving them a chance to hypertrophy in response to the stimulus that you are applying through those exercises. So your first priority is to begin developing your technique. So week 1 of your program, week 2, week 3, week 4, your priority should not be to do something like, go in and go to failure on all those exercises. Instead, it might be the case that you say, okay, I'm going to do three sets, but I'm not going to push it all the way to failure. I'm somewhere between maybe 6 to 10 reps, let's say. Let's say you're doing 6 to 10 reps, and instead of saying, oh, I'm going to see how much weight I can do for 10 reps, you're going to pick a weight that's kind of comfortable and you're going to see what your technique is like. And you just start to develop your technique, you start to get used to the exercises, you start to feel what it's like, you start to correct any issues that maybe pop up. And then you'll start to find a pattern or a groove or a technique that seems to suit you best. And then what you do the next day, when you come in, you maybe add just a little unit of weight to the bar. Okay, so you take your 3 sets that you did and you add maybe 2.5 or 5 kilos to the bar and you see how that looks. What I would discourage beginners from doing is trying to see, how much can I possibly do? Because that will come. It will come, trust me, but you don't need to get there right away, okay? So once you've completed your initial, a month, 2 months, 3 months of training, you're gonna have a pretty good technique base down, hopefully, and then you can begin to start pushing things a little bit harder. So they're important tips, choose a handful of exercises that you want to prioritize, get your technique going, start with a low number of sets, and you're also going to be wondering, how often should I be doing these exercises per week? What should my program actually look like? If I was a beginner, now I would start with probably 3 days per week of training. I think that's a nice way of going about things. And what you can do then is disperse your exercises across the week so that you're trying to get each one done, maybe twice per week, or you're trying to get each variation done twice per week. So what that might look like is on Monday you're doing a barbell back squat, but on Friday you're doing a barbell front squat. You could have some variation in there. It's really up to you, and to be honest, I wouldn't be sweating it too much. Is it optimal to do two different? Is it optimal to do just one? I think you're going to be fine either way, and it will earn itself out over time. The same could be said for something like a barbell bench press. You might do a flat barbell bench press on a Monday, but then you might do an incline dumbbell bench press on a Friday, and then you can start to build your program around that, So they're the types of things that I would be thinking about. I'd be taking all those exercises. I'd be prioritizing my technique. I'd start with maybe 3 days per week, and I'd do maybe three sets per day of each exercise on the 2 respective days. So for example, it could be that you're squatting Monday and Friday, you're deadlifting Monday and Wednesday, and it could be the case that you're doing your overhead press on Wednesday and Friday, you're doing bench press variations on Monday and Friday. You could start to disperse it like that and start to build your own program. I'm not going to list the whole program here because obviously we have 3-day training templates, we have a beginner's guidebook, so you can start to fine-tune those details there, but this is where we hand out the practical tips. So they'd be the main training tips. Obviously we can get way more specific in terms of what exactly you should be doing, but I'd rather you took away the principle that it's not about doing as much as you possibly can. It's not about doing every exercise in the gym. It's about getting accustomed to the gym environment, learning some of the exercises that you're likely to be doing for a while, and then starting to make some gradual progress with a program that is relatively reasonable. You don't want to start with a 6-day per week program. I've been there, done that, and I can tell you I would much rather go back and just do 3 days per week starting off and actually make the most of your progress. Because what you'll find is that when you start these 5, 6, 7-day programs, you're sore all the time. You're not progressing your strength because you're not really recovering and adapting to the training that you're doing, and that's ultimately the name of the game. All right? So, having said all that, and having taken a sip of my coffee, the next thing that you're obviously going to be wondering is, what should we be doing with nutrition? Because they're essentially the 2 key pillars for a beginner who's starting to get into the gym. So you've sorted out your training now, but now you're wondering, hey guys, what's the story with my diet? What exactly should I be doing? Do I need to follow a particular diet? Do I need to eat 6 times per day? What's the story? And to be honest, your goal as a beginner is really starting to develop the key nutrition habits that are going to carry you forward for life, okay? So the first things first, what I would be trying to do is to develop some consistency in my day-to-day meal structure. This goes for health, it goes for body composition, it goes for performance. Trying to develop some sort of consistency. Now, what you don't need to do is to start, eating 6 times per day, okay? Instead, what you'd rather do is find a meal structure that actually suits your schedule. For the vast majority of people, that's probably 3 large meals per day. For some people, it's 4 meals per day, okay? It just depends on your own individual schedule. But if we take the standard breakfast, lunch, dinner approach, then that's a good starting point, all right? So then you can start to tweak your meals, and it could be the case that you also have a snack or 2 throughout the day, depending on how many calories you require to actually begin gaining weight. So what that snack could do is actually take you to the point where you're getting a little bit extra protein in your diet, okay? So if we take the 3 meals, we take the snack, what do you actually want within each meal? That's kind of a key question that you're probably wondering. And like one of the basic things that you want when you're starting to develop a muscle gain diet is that you want sufficient protein in your diet. So that's where you start to use that 3-meal structure to, build an approach that's going to work for you. So for example, if you normally have porridge for breakfast and that's your baseline, or you normally have toast for breakfast, then your question is going to be, how am I going to add more protein to this meal so that I'm starting to move towards my muscle gain goals? And what I would do there is say, all right, if I'm having something like porridge, what could I potentially add? So you could add something like yogurt, that could be part of that meal. You could add something like whey protein, you could add something like whole milk. You're starting to add something that's going to add an element of protein to that meal, and it's also going to add some calories. And that's what we will discuss in a moment, is the topic of calories. But that's your starting point. So you're adding something to that meal to increase the protein content. It may be the case that it's already looked after. If you're just having toast and that's your thing, you're starting with 2 pieces of toast in the day, again, it's not about totally overriding everything, it's about making small changes. So in that case, what you could do is, all right, I normally have 2 pieces of toast, so what I'm going to do is add 2 eggs. So you're going to add 2 eggs, you're going to have a poached egg on one, poached egg on the other, fried egg on one, fried egg on the other, whatever you want to do. And then you've added some protein to that meal. So that could be somewhere between 12 and 14 grams of protein, depending on the size of the egg. And also you could have maybe 3 to 5 grams of protein in each slice of bread, because there is some protein in bread as well. So then you're up around, 20, 25 grams of protein even, and that's pretty decent. That's a good starting point. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to start using these meals as templates to begin developing a better approach for you and your muscle building. For meal 2 then, your lunch, again, it's the same principle. It's a case of saying, do I have enough protein in this meal? How would I know? What am I going to do? If you normally have, cheese sandwiches, that's what you have for lunch, then what you do is you say, all right, I'm going to add some meat to this. I'm going to add some ham to my cheese sandwiches. And now you're getting some protein from the bread, from the ham, from the cheese. Boom. You're adding that little bit of protein. Same for your dinner. Same story. I won't keep repeating it. But basically what you're trying to do is have protein in each meal. Okay. How much? If you were to ask that question, it really becomes about your own size. For example, if you're 80 kilos body weight, normally what we'd say is 1.6 grams per kilo roughly is a good starting point with protein. So that's for someone who's trying to gain muscle, they're in a calorie surplus. 1.6 grams per kilo is a good starting point. Some people prefer to just say 2 grams per kilo because it's definitely enough. Like, if 6 grams is enough for say 99% of people, then by saying 2 grams, it's easier to deliver the message because it's a whole number, and it's easier just to, make sure everyone's looked after. But to be honest, you can start with 1.6 and work from there. What does that actually look like? What's 0.6 of 80? 48, yeah, 48 I think it is, so 6 8 48. So 48 plus 80, 128 grams of protein. Let's just say 130 grams of protein. That's what you're looking for. What might that look like throughout the day? You could have, 30 grams at breakfast, 30 grams at lunch, 40 grams at dinner, because typically people have a bit more protein at their dinner. That has us at 100 grams, and then you could have 30 grams in the form of a scoop of protein after your workout, and that could be your supplementary snack, okay? Now, just because we've said all that and we've added protein to our meals, that does not mean that you're taken care of in terms of your muscle building needs. The big need for someone to start building muscle and to start adding body weight in particular is to be in a surplus of calories, okay? So calories are the way that we measure the energy content of the diet, okay? So when we start to measure the energy content of the diet, it gives us an idea of how our system is going to respond to a given level of intake of food. So if we consume more calories than we expend throughout the day, then what that means is that we have got a surplus of energy that can be stored. So that can be stored as body fat, it can be stored as muscle glycogen, or it can be stored in the form of new muscle tissue that has been built, okay? So the energy has been diverted towards building new tissue, and the amino acids have been brought together as new muscle tissue, okay? So that's the basic 101 simplistic view of how calories interlink with the process of muscle gain. So that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to consume a little bit more than you normally would require to maintain your body weight. The thing is, you don't necessarily need to start micromanaging and tracking calories and everything at the beginning. When you're a beginner, your goal, as I said, should be to start developing those habits. As you increase your protein, that's an anabolic stimulus, is having enough protein in the diet, and then starting to eat more calories as needed. So it may be the case that in your first 4 weeks of training, what you notice is that your body weight hasn't actually changed at all. So then what you would do is you'd look at your meals across the day and you'd say, where can I make an increase? And it may be the case that normally what you do is you have your protein shake after the gym, but then you add in a granola bar and a piece of fruit, and that increases your daily caloric intake by 300 calories per day, and that could be enough for you to start moving them in the right direction. In general, we would say gaining maybe a kilo per month, for a male, maybe a bit less for a female. An easier way of saying it is just like 1% body weight per month as a rate of gain is generally appropriate. Maybe a bit faster in beginners, potentially up to 1.5%, maybe even 2% if you're really seeing I'm adding muscle. You can start to add body weight in line with that. So for example, if I was an 80 kilo male and I was trying to gain body weight, it could be that I'm adding 1% of my body weight, 0.8 kilos per month, and that's going to see me, gaining relatively leanly, so I'm not just adding excess body fat, I'm not massively ballooning up my body weight, I'm adding on lean muscle tissue. And it's not like there's a difference between lean muscle tissue and not lean muscle tissue. What I mean is that the body weight gain itself is lean, so it's more muscle tissue relative to fat, and that's obviously what most people are looking for when they begin to embark on a muscle building training or nutrition regime. So that's what you're looking for with calories. As I said, the goal is not to sweat that too much. I don't even want you to sweat the rate of gain stuff too much. The goal is just to start nudging body weight along, start nudging that process forward by developing good habits. So, you know, I didn't spend an extensive amount of time talking about the other macronutrients, talking about carbohydrates and fat, because ultimately, I don't want someone to feel like they need to totally override their diet at the start, okay? It's very likely that you're already eating a diet that is somewhat balanced, so to speak, in terms of its macronutrient composition. You're probably not eating a really low carb diet or a really low fat diet if you're just eating like a regular person, but you can still begin to make some positive changes in those departments. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you're consuming all of your carbohydrates per day from, you know, processed low fiber sources, then what you might want to do is start making some changes to that. So for example, if you normally have Cocoa Pops for breakfast, you might swap that out for porridge. So there is still a consideration of how these foods interlink with health considerations as well, and it's not just all about muscle building. But as I said, the goal of this video is to get you guys thinking about some of the basic things that you need to consider to gain your first 10 pounds of muscle. The thing is, in that first year of training, you don't need to worry about micromanaging everything. That's why I'm not getting too deep into the details here. Let the advanced people worry about that. If you want to start focusing on more of the minutiae, that's fine. But the best thing you can do is actually just get stuck into the process and see what's actually happening in your body when you begin to start this process. For example, if you see that, you know, you take my advice and you're gaining, you know, muscle steadily, and you're looking in the mirror, you're like, damn, yeah, cool, I look better, and you're looking at the scales and you're like, yeah, I've actually gained 10 pounds, my body weight's up, I feel better, I feel stronger, all my lifts have been going up, then you don't need to go and change anything. You need to just keep on ticking along. Whereas, if you've taken some of this advice and you're like, look, I'm the same body weight, nothing has changed, you might want to think some more about the details. You might want to actually ask yourself, all right, am I actually eating enough calories? Am I executing this program properly? You know, am I actually doing the things that are required? And obviously, they're the types of things that we help individuals with a little bit more on a kind of a one-to-one online coaching basis or a group coaching basis, or if you check out our program templates or the beginner's guidebook, plenty of information there. However, if you do have more specific questions about your situation, here's the place to ask them. Drop them in the comments box below. I can give you some more insight. I can give you some more you know, specific tips for your situation, because I understand that it's tough being a beginner. It's tough to try and sift through what information is relevant for you and what information is being put out there for more advanced individuals. And if you start to get too worried about what advanced individuals are doing, it can often sidetrack you, and it can often lead to you just spinning your wheels, changing your program every week, changing your diet every week, and changing between bulking and cutting and maintaining, and you never really get anywhere. So totally understand that. As I said, questions below, drop them below, let me know what you think, let me know what videos you'd like to see, and of course, be happy and remember that it is, in fact, too easy. See you soon.